Welcome to Washington Talk. I'm Young-Kyo Kim. During his visit to the Pentagon, President Joe Biden said the United States will not hesitate to use force if necessary to protect allies. Hours later, President Biden spoke with China's President Xi Jinping for 2 straight hours, their first call since Biden took office. And following his call with Japanese Foreign Minister Doshimizu Motegi, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke with South Korea's new Foreign Minister Chung Eui-yong for the first time on the phone, stressing the importance of the trilateral cooperation among the U.S., South Korea, and Japan. Today, we invited 2 former ambassadors to South Korea to discuss how the U.S. can strengthen its Asian alliance while navigating policies on North Korea. Joining us is Ambassador Kathleen Stephens, President of the Korea Economic Institute of America. She served as a U.S. Ambassador to South Korea and Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs. Ambassador Christopher Hill also joins us today. He is currently professor at Columbia University's School of International and Public Affairs in New York. Ambassador Hill served as Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs and the U.S. Ambassador to South Korea. Welcome to the program. Great to have you with us today.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you.
First of all, on its strategy towards North Korea, the Biden administration keeps emphasizing the U.S. needs to coordinate not only with South Korea, but also with Japan. Why is this trilateral coordination necessary, Ambassador Stephens?
Well, thank you. It's great to join you. As your introductory comments made clear, President Biden and his new administration are emphasizing the fact that this is clearly a regional issue that requires a regional approach. And within that region, of course, the United States has 2 key allies in Northeast Asia. One is the Republic of Korea and the other is Japan. So it's a very expected and natural thing that as part of developing a strategy, we'd be looking closely with Seoul, but also with Tokyo at how the threat has changed, where it stands now, and the elements of both deterrence and reducing the threat, as well as what we do about it. So I think that's going to happen in not only a bilateral, but also a trilateral, I hope, mode and a broader regional mode as well.
Mm-hmm. Ambassador Hill, why is this coordination among the U.S., South Korea, and Japan so important when dealing with North Korea?
Well, I agree completely with Ambassador Stephens on this. This is a regional matter. It should not just be handled by the U.S., where it talks to the North Koreans and then reports back to its allies. The policy should emerge from within the alliance. And I would say we need to also talk to some others, but no more important than talking to the Republic of Korea, on whose peninsula this problem resides. I mean, to be sure, the Trump administration kept the North Korean issue very much in focus. It was one of their major endeavors in foreign policy. I would expect it to continue to be so under President Biden.
Mm-hmm. Ambassador Hill, does this also mean that the Biden team wants South Korea to change its approach towards North Korea under this trilateral cooperation?
I think there's an understanding, an underlying understanding among U.S. policymakers for years that South Korea has a particular perspective on the issue. As I mentioned, it's on their own peninsula. It involves North Korea, which has many family members of citizens of the Republic of Korea. So understandably, it means perhaps more to South Korea than it does to some of the other countries. That said, I think it's very important to have very close consultations with an understanding of what the approaches will be of the different countries. You know, surprises may be fine for birthday parties. Surprises are not fine for diplomacy, especially among allies. So I think it's a very good thing to see this early cooperation already underway.
Mm-hmm. Ambassador Stephens, do you think the Biden administration is expecting South Korea to play somewhat different role from what it did during the past few years?
Well, I'm going to take that question as about more than North Korea policy, although clearly that's an important part. And I think the answer is yes, and that's in the context of President Biden making it very clear that the United States is going to take a somewhat different role, and in particularly the president himself. I mean, I think we saw during the previous administration, if you like, a more institutional approach that continued in terms of the security alliance from our Defense Department, from parts of the State Department, and then we saw this highly personalized approach from President Trump. So I think the different role will be the American president will play a somewhat different role. And the American president, I think, has made pretty clear, in this case, President Biden, that he's not going to be announcing the suspension of joint military exercises without consulting with Seoul or indeed with his own Pentagon, that he's not going to be floating the idea of the withdrawal of troops from South Korea without coordinating with allies, and most importantly South Korea, but also our other allies. So within that context, yes, I think South Korea is going to play a larger role, a role of greater partnership, and as Ambassador Hill was suggesting, of continued conversation rather than kind of episodic surprises followed by reaction.
So do you think the U.S. pretty much stressing the Asian alliance is something going beyond North Korea?
I think that there is an expectation that both countries, as mature, countries with important security interests, will see it in their own interests to work closely together, and if the United States, in the context of their alliances with the United States, to make sure that we're on the right track and that we work in concert with each other. Not that we always have exactly the same position on everything, but that we coordinate it, particularly when it comes to deterrence and making sure that we're trying to enhance the security in the area in a pretty dangerous time, quite honestly.
Mm-hmm. Ambassador Hill, do you agree with the view that U.S. is expecting South Korea to play more than just deterring from North Korea?
There's no question. I think a lot of the good ideas that have emerged in terms of dealing with North Korea have emerged through this consultative pattern with the ROK. So I would expect to see more, and I'd want to see more. I think the idea that this should be just the U.S.'s problem, I think, was a real misunderstanding of the issue. It's important that we have these regular consultations, and I might add that it would be helpful. It's not easy, but it would be helpful if the ROK and Japan could kind of work things out. That would be helpful because North Korea is fond of kind of doing initiative shopping. They go to one ally, they go to another ally, they try to get the best deal, they play countries off against each other. It would be helpful if we were all more or less singing from the same sheet of music.
Mm-hmm. I believe many people understand the U.S. coordination with South Korea on the North Korean issues is necessary, but when it comes to Japan, what is the role of Japan here? Ambassador Hill?
Japan has always played an important role in this issue. For starters, the U.S.-ROK alliance, which involves the capacity to deter North Korea and make sure North Korea understands that any military effort would be met swiftly and very successfully by the allies. All those military efforts do involve U.S. forces in Japan, and so there's a lot of coordination that's required just on that kind of deterrence level. In addition, I think it's pretty clear that if we're going to achieve a solution to North Korea and they finally do denuclearize, we need to look at this as a regional issue. And in so doing, we have to understand that if you look at a map, you'll see Japan very, very close in, and we need to make sure that Japan is sort of part of the solution. Again, this isn't always easy, and this will require a lot of sort of iterations as we get closer to the ultimate goal.
Ambassador Stephens, given ongoing tensions between Seoul and Tokyo, how successful will these efforts be?
Well, I don't think it'll be easy. I do. My understanding is that when President Biden spoke with Prime Minister Suga and President Moon, that he did raise the concern he has about the current state of relations between Seoul and Tokyo. What I hear from just reading the press in South Korea is there's great interest in the Tokyo Olympics as a possible venue for jumpstarting some kind of effort of engagement vis-a-vis, well, maybe Japan and maybe North Korea. So I think that's a welcome sign that people are thinking about things that might that might help to get both capitals working in concert. But I think it's very difficult. But I think you will see from the Biden administration an effort to play some kind of mediating role. It's not easy. I think it will. I hope it will be a very quiet one. But I also hope that in the end we have two democracies with very difficult and different histories, and in Japan and South Korea. But it's clearly in the interest of both of those countries to at least move from where they are now into something that is more constructive, because they have some common challenges and some common interests.
Mm-hmm. Ambassador Hill, how can U.S. steer the way as it seeks to go together with these two Asian allies?
Well, I think, as Ambassador Stephens has said, this is not going to be done overnight. This is going to take some time. The whole issue of North Korea, for those people interested in instant gratification, the issue of North Korea offers no refuge for them. It's going to take a lot of hard work and some time. That said, though, I think when there's a consensus on how to move forward on issues, and if there's an understanding of the different perspectives on those issues, I think it will be more effective in terms of making the North Koreans understand that they could have a better future without weapons than they have with the weapons. So I think it's a matter of convincing the North Koreans that we are all in this together, that they can't go shopping with various partners and try to divide us, that we're all together on this, and we all feel very strongly, and we all have a sense that we will eventually succeed with this. So I'm not saying it's easy, I'm not saying it's quick, but I am saying that by working together, we will not only improve issues that are not dealing with North Korea, but I think we can also address the North Korean issue by a sense of working together on this.
There are some concerns in Washington that the U.S. and South Korea are not seeing eye to eye on North Korea's nuclear issue. Some are worried that the South Korean government may prioritize the improvement of inter-Korean relations over progress on the denuclearization. Is this concern valid?
There's no question that, as Ambassador Stephens said, there's a different perspective at times in how various allies look at North Korea. But in my experience, and I spent 4 years working on this, I never saw an issue that was somehow so serious as to cause dislocation or cause problems. Obviously, the ROK has some different perspectives, but I think we've always been able to work that out, especially in the context of close consultations and avoiding surprises.
Ambassador Stephens, do you see the possibility of South Korea trying to move things forward as quickly as possible, especially when South Korean President Moon Jae-in has only about 1 year left in his term?
Well, certainly political calendars do matter. And I think everyone in the Biden administration is aware that President Moon is coming into the last year of his term and has a new foreign minister who seems to be, pretty explicitly, I don't know if he said it sort of officially, but putting a priority on seeing what kind of policy can be launched with the new Biden administration in place, with a sense of some urgency. But, I get the sense that the Biden administration understands that this is not a policy review that can kind of just dawdle for the next, 6 months or so. They have a lot of people in the administration with some experience with past transitions, and I think there's an eagerness on both sides to come to a view of what are some of the initial principles we can put out there to try to take the initiative. But I also have to say I don't think that the North Korea issue is going to be solved in 1 year, or for that matter, 4 years. And I do think it's in the interest of both countries. Maybe it's easy for me to say as not a politician, but to look at the situation as it is now and to come up with a sustainable approach that will see us through a period of time.
And meanwhile, President Joe Biden had a 2-hour phone call with Chinese President Xi Jinping. This came after Biden's outreach to Asian allies. There is a growing concern in Washington that Beijing is gradually undermining the U.S.-South Korea alliance using its economic clout. Ambassador Hill, how should the new U.S. government address this?
I know there's that concern. I like to think, however, that the U.S.-ROK relationship, which is a pretty mature relationship, we can handle any efforts by anyone else to somehow weaken it. China involves a great challenge to us all. It's an enormous country with an appetite to do a lot in this world. So I think what's important about the Biden administration coming into office is a sense that it needs to be clear with the Chinese, it needs to be consistent, but it needs to be willing to have real conversations with the Chinese. I mean, one of the problems during the Trump administration was we had a Secretary of State who refused to go to China for over 2 years. So I think that kind of unwillingness to sit down and talk was not helpful. And I think in this new team, we're going to see people who are willing to talk, put our issues on the table and see what can be done to improve the relationship. You know, I don't care how many hundreds of years ahead, China is still going to be here and we're still going to be here. And by the way, the ROK is still going to be here. So we need to work things out a little better than we have.
Mm-hmm. And the same question to you, Ambassador Stephens, is Beijing undermining the U.S.-South Korea alliance? And is there any way for the U.S. to alleviate the situation?
Well, I think the fact that U.S.-China relations have become so fraught and are not going to immediately become simple, as Ambassador Hill suggested, just because we have a new president in office, although I do welcome the new tone that I think the Biden administration is trying to bring to it. But the fact that this relationship has become so much more competitive, so much more stressed, reduces kind of South Korea's area to maneuver. It makes it very difficult. And I do hear a lot of anxiety from my South Korean friends about this notion that it's being forced to make choices it doesn't have to make. I think that actually kind of underplays South Korea's considerable strength. South Korea is no longer the shrimp among the whales. It has a lot of autonomy, a lot of capability, and it also has very strong interests, which it can clearly express interest in its strong security partnership with the United States, but also its partnership of values, and clearly its geographical situation, its concerns vis-a-vis North Korea, its economic future vis-a-vis China. But I think if it makes decisions in the context of what those interests are and what South Korea wants the region to look like, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, when Ambassador Hill is going to be around, and what it wants the U.S. role to be, I think there'll be a real convergence of a kind of constructive, realistic, pragmatic, but policy that is based on shared values. Because again, getting back to you're saying is China kind of making it really difficult. China hasn't made it as difficult as it could have because, frankly, China hasn't behaved very well. And I think that South Korea has been rather offended by some of the things that China has done vis-a-vis South Korea, but also elsewhere in the region. And it's a reminder that it's in South Korea's interest to see the United States return, or not just return, but shape a policy that is true to the kinds of values that have allowed our alliance to become so resilient and so strong.
Mm-hmm. And my last question today. During the Trump administration, U.S. and the South Korea seem to have faced some challenges in their alliance, especially, for example, the defense burden sharing was one of the big issues between the two countries. Do you think Biden administration will approach this issue differently? Ambassador Stephens first.
Well, I can quote from President Biden's column in Yonhap while he was still a candidate, in which he described the approach of the previous administration as extortionist. So I guess that was a pretty good sign that he was already planning to approach it differently. My understanding is that the office at the State Department responsible for bringing this negotiation to a conclusion is in touch with its South Korean counterparts, and that the aim on both sides, and my impression is to try to conclude this in a way that, again, reflects our values and our interests. So I think that, and I hope that this current negotiation will be concluded soon. There actually is one coming up with Japan. Speaking of, Japan is watching what happens. But I think clearly there was really unnecessary kind of collateral damage done to the sense of trust and just confidence in each other by this very transactional and extortionist way in which it was handled. And I'm glad that that is behind us.
And Ambassador Hill?
Yeah, I agree. I can't think of a worse way to handle those negotiations than the way the Trump administration did. I think it undermined the quality of the alliance and all of us who have worked to improve the alliance. So it will definitely get better. The question, of course, is can we take some of these issues, put them in a longer term context? But I think fundamentally, the reason they're going to get a lot better is we have a president now who believes in this alliance. He believes in the concept of alliances. He does not see them just as transactions in some kind of vegetable market, but rather sees them as long-term commitments. And so I think things are going to get a lot better, and I hope we never see this again.
And meanwhile, Seoul continues to push for reviving the stalled talks between the U.S. and North Korea. Washington makes it clear that there is a risk in moving too soon on North Korea. We'll have to watch how the U.S. and South Korea will narrow their differences. Ambassador Stephens and Ambassador Hill, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Pleasure. Happy New Year.
And that does it for this week's Washington Talk from Voice of America. Please join us again next week for more analysis.